In the stillness of medieval towns, when the sun dipped below the rooftops and silence replaced the clang of forge and bell, death was not an interruption, it was a neighbor. It lived in the shadows of stone walls and echoed in the chants of monasteries. For those who lived between the 11th and 15th centuries, dealing with the dead was neither mysterious nor distant. It was a sacred responsibility, a grim reality that shaped their architecture, their faith, and their daily routines. When someone died in a medieval village, the news spread not by whisper but by custom. There were no morgues or ambulances. There was the church bell, tolled in solemn rhythm. 3 slow rings if the deceased was a man, 2 for a woman, 1 for a child. The bell not only announced the passing, it summoned the living to prepare the final journey. The body, often still warm, was laid on a wooden plank or inside the home, never alone. It was considered dangerous, even sinful, to leave the dead unattended. Loved ones or neighbors sat vigil, sometimes for days, lighting candles and saying prayers, not only to honor the departed soul, but to guard against evil, or worse, the body returning in unrest. Cleaning the body was a duty of love. Women usually performed this ritual. With cloth, warm water, and lavender or rosemary, they gently wiped the limbs. Coins were placed over the eyes to keep them shut. The jaw tied with a strip of cloth to keep the mouth closed. These practices were not just for appearances. They were meant to keep death from looking too alive. In some towns, herbs and flowers were tucked into the clothing or coffin to mask the odor. But not all death was peaceful. In times of plague, the scene changed dramatically. Families were often too frightened to touch the corpse. Special workers called plague barriers or death collectors walked the streets. They wore thick cloaks and long masks filled with aromatic herbs, believing it would shield them from the disease. Their job was to collect the dead swiftly and dump them into mass graves. No candles, no prayers. Just dirt. In normal times, the preparation was much more respectful. The body would be dressed, not in finery, but in a simple white shroud or the clothing of the humble. Shoes were rare. Why wear shoes to a place you'll never walk again? Richer families might prepare a wooden coffin, though many common folk were buried without one, wrapped only in cloth. Then came the procession, the funeral walk. Villagers followed the body through the narrow lanes toward the churchyard or parish cemetery. Along the way, they sang or whispered Latin prayers. Sometimes a wooden cross or a candle would lead the way. If the deceased had been well loved, people lined the path, bowing their heads. Children often watched in silence, their eyes learning early what death looked like. Burial was typically done by the church. Cemeteries were hallowed ground, surrounded by stone walls. Some were crowded with simple wooden markers. Others held grand tombs of knights and nobles. But even among the poor, the burial was treated with reverence. The priest would speak final words. The grave would be filled by hand. And then life would slowly return to its rhythm. But for some, burial came too late. Medieval people believed the soul lingered near the body. That's why timing was crucial. In winter, it was easier. Cold air slowed decay. But in summer, burial needed to happen fast, sometimes within hours. Delay risked not just stench, but suspicion. If a body appeared too red or stiff or changed in strange ways, rumors spread. Was this natural death or punishment? Poison? Witchcraft? Not everyone received burial. Criminals, excommunicated individuals, and suicides were often denied a Christian grave. Their bodies were buried in unmarked pits outside city walls. It was believed their souls were restless, doomed to wander, to haunt, to never find peace. Some graves were even marked with rocks or thorns to keep spirits from rising. Monks and priests had their own death customs. In monasteries, when a brother died, his body was washed, dressed in his robe, and laid in the chapel. Other monks prayed over him day and night until the burial. Some orders even practiced death rehearsals, lying in coffins to meditate on mortality. Death to them was not a curse. It was the doorway home. And what of relics? In some churches, bones of saints were kept in golden boxes or glass shrines. Pilgrims traveled far to touch or see these remains. It was believed that holy bones could heal sickness, bless crops, or protect towns. The dead, especially the blessed dead, were part of the living world, honored, visited, even celebrated. Graveyards, too, were more than burial sites. They were gathering places. Children played among the tombstones. Elders told stories there. Some held open-air markets on the churchyard edge. The presence of the dead was not something to fear. It was something to live beside. And yet, the medieval people feared certain dead. The idea of the restless corpse, the revenant, haunted many minds. Stories were told of the dead who rose to harm the living. Villagers spoke of screams in the night, or shallow graves dug open. In some cases, suspected graves were reopened and the corpse mutilated, head removed, chest pierced, body burned. Not from cruelty, from fear that death was not done. As the centuries moved on, death in medieval Europe remained a deeply communal experience. It wasn't outsourced or hidden. It was woven into the rhythm of everyday life. In homes and fields and cloisters, death waited patiently. And when it came, the living responded not with denial, but with duty. For the wealthier classes, funerals could be elaborate. Nobles and lords prepared their own tombs while still alive, carving effigies of themselves in stone, often depicted as sleeping peacefully, hands folded, eyes closed. These tombs were placed in churches where the faithful would walk past them daily. It wasn't vanity. It was a reminder that even the mighty lie still. Sometimes the wealthy left instructions in their wills for dozens or even hundreds of masses to be said in their name. These were known as chantry masses, and entire chapels were built to house them. The idea was simple. The more prayers spoken after death, the better chance the soul had of reaching heaven. It was spiritual insurance, paid in silver and stone. But for ordinary folk, remembrance came through storytelling. Around fireplaces or inside smoky taverns, families passed on tales of their ancestors. A mother's strength, a grandfather's sacrifice, a brother who died in battle, a child lost in a winter fever. Names were spoken. Memories kept alive not in marble, but in mouths and hearts. Still, not all customs were purely gentle. In some parts of medieval Europe, certain bones were treated differently. Ossuaries, bone houses, became common when cemeteries ran out of space. After a few years, old graves were reopened. The bones removed, cleaned, stacked in neat rows inside stone crypts or beneath chapels. Skulls stared out from behind iron gates. Femurs made walls. It sounds morbid to modern minds, but to medieval people, it was practical and reverent. These bones weren't trash. They were ancestors. One of the most famous examples is the Sedlec ossuary in today's Czech Republic. Inside, bones of over 40,000 people form chandeliers, pyramids, and altars. It's a cathedral of the dead, a place where art and memory meet, and where death becomes part of beauty. Then there were the traveling dead, relics that journeyed from town to town. Some were carried during famines or droughts, believed to bring rain or healing. Others were hidden during times of war, then returned with great ceremony. These bones were symbols of connection between heaven and earth, between past and present. Medieval people also believed in signs. Dreams of the dead were taken seriously. If someone dreamt of a deceased loved one crying, it might mean they were stuck in purgatory, suffering, waiting for prayers. In response, families might donate food to the poor, light candles, or hire monks to pray in the name of the soul. But what of the bodies never found? Soldiers lost in distant fields, sailors drowned at sea, travelers who never returned. For them, families created empty graves, small memorials or crosses placed where the person had last been seen. Some even carved the name into a stone at home. Mourning wasn't about the physical body. It was about memory, honor, and peace. Women played a key role in death rituals, not just in washing and watching the dead, but in mourning. In many cultures, women were designated as public mourners, wailing, singing laments, or beating their chests during funerals. Their cries were believed to guide the soul and express the grief of the community. These laments weren't just noise, they were songs of goodbye. Over time, saints and sinners alike were painted into murals, the famous Dance of Death, or Danse Macabre. These artworks showed skeletons leading kings, peasants, and bishops in a dance toward the grave. The message was universal. Death spares no one. It visits the palace and the hut. It invites everyone to dance. And yet, there was acceptance. A quiet understanding that life was a passing gift. Churches often displayed hourglasses or skulls near the pulpit, reminders not of fear, but of preparation. Memento mori, they said in Latin. Remember, you will die. It wasn't meant to be grim. It was meant to inspire humility, gratitude, and reflection. Even children were taught to view death not as a punishment, but as a reunion. A reunion with God, with family, with peace. In some homes, small prayer books were passed down through generations, each name handwritten inside. A record of life. A promise to remember. Sometimes, graveyards became flooded or damaged by storms. In such cases, bones might resurface. But instead of panic, people gathered to rebury them with care. Even centuries-old remains were treated with reverence. Because in the medieval mind, the soul may have moved on, but the body still deserved respect. There were, however, exceptions to honor. In times of war, enemy bodies were sometimes burned or left unburied as a symbol of victory. Executed criminals were displayed on gibbets, their bodies left to rot as a warning. It was not common, but it served a message. Justice, however harsh, did not always end with death. Still, across all cultures and regions, the core belief remained that death was not the end. That how you treated the dead revealed the soul of the living. Whether in quiet village funerals or grand cathedral burials, medieval people showed deep care for the bodies left behind. As night fell across stone towns and candlelight flickered on worn wooden beams, families lay in their beds. Hearing the wind through shutters, the hoot of owls, the final hush of the day. Somewhere in a churchyard, the earth rested gently over someone once beloved. A soul moved on. A story lingered. And in that moment, life and death held hands. Not as enemies, but as parts of the same truth. The truth medieval people knew well, that we all return to the earth. And that in remembering those who came before, we keep them alive in the quiet, beating rhythm of our hearts.